Hello there and welcome. I think we're all up and running. um, we're here today. This is our second webinar today about sexual harassment and hospitality. And this one's for employers how to look after your workers and your business. Just going to do a chat for this session. It will be available to others on the website and via email after the session. We've had some more people register that aren't here yet, so hopefully they will access that recording. And they might appear to be on. So we'll kick off. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting virtually and in person today on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Adelaide region, and we respect their culture and heritage beliefs, and we acknowledge that they're still as important to the living Kaurna people of today. So, hi, my name's Kylie. I'm a lawyer here at the Working Women's Centre, and today we're going to be chatting along with Jamie from Not So Hospitable around the issue of sexual harassment in the hospitality industry. So we're going to be talking about kind of conversations that are happening in the industry, some facts and stats, and then we're going to go through the legal definitions of sexual harassment and what your obligations are as an employer. We'll discuss some issues and normalised behaviours. So what's currently happening that happens so often that people accept it, but actually it's not okay. We'll discuss the risks to you as an employer, and how you can start to create a healthier environment for your workers. And also we'll touch on how to appropriately deal with a complaint, and then also give you a bit more info about where to go from here if you're interested in further options. So we'll be talking a fair bit about your obligations under the Fair Work Act, and also in discrimination relevant laws as well. So I do just want to give a content warning that we will be speaking about sexual harassment and sexual violence in the workplace. We'll try not to get too much into the details of it, but please take care of yourself, and if you feel affected and you want to step away, that's completely fine. Like I said, this recording will be available later, so you can always come back to it when you're ready. So firstly, I'd just like to talk a bit about the Working Women's Centre. So we've been around since 1979, and we are a free and confidential service for women and vulnerable workers who aren't part of a union. So but mostly we do advise women, but we're also open to giving help to other genders as well if they're vulnerable workers who aren't members of the union. We also give these free advice sessions for small business employers about federal workplace laws, like we're doing here today. We are a not-for-profit, but we are funded by state and federal government grants, and as well as some smaller grants from unions and other places. And really, the bulk of the work that we do here, I'm a lawyer here, there's 3 or 4 other lawyers here as well, and advice on workplace issues to those workers. So a lot of giving advice around wage theft, underpayments, unfair dismissals, discrimination on not only sex and sexual harassment, but also disability discrimination, racial discrimination, or family responsibilities and work-life balance between work and caring for a family, as well, of course, sexual harassment. So we do currently have a strategic focus on sexual harassment. We've luckily received some new funding specifically to provide extra legal services to give sexual harassment advice and representation to workers. So we are prioritising those services to those workers at the moment. We also have an advocacy arm. So that's involving like recognising that the issues that we see, some of them are systemic issues, that can't easily be solved by giving one-on-one advice. So the advocacy side of things researches those issues and lobbies and does some project work to try and prevent problems occurring. And we also have an education arm. So we give fee-for-service training to employers about workplace rights and obligations, and we can tailor training to your needs. That's a bit about me and the centre. And I'd like to introduce now my co-host for this afternoon, Jamie. Over to you, Jamie.
Hi there, my name is Jamie and I started a movement called Not So Hospitable, which essentially gathers testimonies on the prevalence of sexual harassment and sexual assault in Adelaide hospitality. I'll go more into that in a little bit, but in 2.5 months, I've gotten over 360 testimonies of people's experiences in hospitality and getting sexually assaulted whilst at work. Should I go into it now?
Yeah,
great. So essentially, this is a grassroots movement highlighting the prevalence of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and bullying that fosters a toxic workplace environment within the Adelaide hospitality community specifically. My intention for creating this platform was, and still is, to gather testimonies, creating a safer space for individuals to share their stories and over time gauge a qualitative and quantitative understanding of the incidences that are occurring within our industry. A little bit about my own background. I've been working in hospitality myself for 14 years. I've worked in fine dining restaurants, bars, clubs, festivals, functions. My family owned a pub in Adelaide as well. So very familiar with the hospitality scene. It's been an industry that I've loved to be a part of. I think it's one of the most amazing industries that Adelaide has to offer. Essentially though, because I've been working in hospitality for so long, and I also have experienced sexual harassment in my workplace more times than I can count on both hands from managers and people in positions of power, I really know and understand quite deeply the prevalence of how bad it is within the industry, and know that, and specifically with women, if you haven't experienced sexual harassment firsthand as a woman in hospo, you know someone that has. So yeah, I guess the information collected it's all being used anonymously as well. I just wanted to say, so there's no names attached, there's no venues attached. My objective isn't to name and shame. I don't think that's going to get us anywhere. What I want to do is I want to open the conversation and start dialogue around something that is quite prevalent in this industry, and help, cultivate an industry in Adelaide that fosters safety, respect, and accessible education, and that's for both staff, but also employees and employers, and people in positions of power. I've been working alongside government bodies, talking about real legislative change, to enforce mandated trainings and education that's accessible to all hospitality venues, and eventually try and get an inquiry into the hospitality scene in Adelaide as well in terms of sexual harassment. So yeah, I think 360 testimonies in 2.5 months is a lot, and that's coming from one person kind of trying to gather those testimonies and give people a safe space to do so. But it's been bittersweet because it's proved me right, but I know how bad of an issue this is, and people have been really waiting to have a chance to share their experiences, and talk about something that's quite a taboo and stigmatized topic of conversation. So now I guess a little bit about why we should be having these conversations in society, and kind of what's happening in other spaces around these conversations of sexual harassment. Because these conversations, especially around sexual harassment in the workplace, have become more normalized over the years. 20 years ago, no one was really talking about it. And now, industries have had inquiries and reforms after all of these stories have started coming out about people in positions of power exploiting their workers, and women specifically. With the Me Too movement, which started in 2006, which kind of was the first big movement I saw kind of talk about sexual harassment at work, with men in positions of this power enacting this. And then there's been Chantel Contos and Teach Us Consent in Sydney, where she gathered 6,000 testimonies on sexual harassment in New South Wales high schools. And because of those conversations and her legislation, the government has now nationally mandated education happening in all schools that start next year. So if you have these conversations, the ball starts rolling and you can actually start to see legislative change happening in a few years, which is incredible. And I guess Not So Hospitable is doing the same thing. And it's the first time I've really seen it in Adelaide where we are seeing testimonies in Hospo that prove how prevalent this issue is. It's been getting media attention, it's been getting government attention, and the venues are finally having these conversations about their own workplace policies, how to report, and to really make sure that their staff are respected and in safe environments that kind of perpetuates safety and respect. A great statistic that I really like to put out there that I found recently was that 3 to 5% of sexual harassment and assault allegations are false. So only 3 to 5%. And that's the same as any other major criminal crime, the exact same. So there's a societal myth that women lie about sexual harassment and assault, and there's actually no data to support that at all. And you've got another really great statistic, don't you?
Yeah, so additionally, with that very small percentage of reports being false, there's also an issue with the number of reports that are made. So only 17% of workers who experience sexual harassment report the conduct, and that's from a 2018 survey done by the Australian Human Rights Commission. So it's definitely out there, it's underreported, and it's just a much bigger issue than I think we have traditionally realised.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's a little bit about why we're talking about what we want to talk about, and coming forward about sexual harassment is still stigmatized. It is looked down on. And from the staff point of view, if you ever wanted to come forward with a report, or ever wanted to come forward with an experience, you're branded as a whistleblower. You're branded as a whistleblower or a troublemaker, and you might not ever be able to get work in that venue or that group of venues if it's owned by a group again. A lot of the time with these testimonies that I received, a really common factor is that it's brushed under the rug. Staff are bullied out, their shifts are cut because they've been strong enough to kind of stand up and talk about it, or they're fired. So, a really important takeaway from this conversation of how prevalent sexual harassment is within the hospital scene is that people don't know how to report it, and they don't know how to follow up a report, or they don't know how to access it. And so that's coming from both sides, right? It's coming from staff, but it's coming from employers and people in positions of power that have never had these trainings on how to properly deal with an incident of sexual harassment. So they get super out of their depth and they don't really know how to go forward. So they're stuck in the mud as well. Another key takeaway is that, this behavior in hospitality with sexual harassment is so normalized now. And it's so normalized that it's actually an accepted part of the job as women, is that that's something that you have to kind of deal with as a woman working in hospitality. And a lot of people don't understand the behavior that's classified harassment or assault. So what that's telling us is that there's a gap of accessible education for both venue owners and managers and people in positions of power, and actual appropriate workplace conduct. And now that we're starting to see those gaps, we can start filling in those gaps by offering trainings, as an employer, knowing that there's a gap in the industry, and really taking an active standpoint to start giving yourself better policies and start creating better working environments for your staff. So this is a survey that came out, or some research that came out quite recently this year, actually. That also is probably one of the only things of research and data collected on hospitality workplace culture. And it came out from the University of Queensland. And they found that 70% of Australian hospitality workers have either experienced sexual, verbal, or racial abuse whilst at work. They found that the customers were the main perpetrators. However, they also found that 42% of respondents also said their managers or supervisors had abused them. Now, that kind of just reflects and highlights what we're really talking about. And the head researcher of the research said, the results expose deep cultural issues in the hospitality industry with poor behaviours and practices that have been normalised and systematic. So again, we know that it's been happening for so long that it is systematic now. So it's about how do we actively start changing these quite toxic behaviours, so we have fair rights and safety at work.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, we find this the same at the Working Women's Centre here. Just the number and breadth of workers that are experiencing this kind of thing at work. We've gotten busier and busier in the last few years, particularly, and I really do think it's because of this greater awareness and conversations that are going on, and people just putting up with it anymore. So I thought it might be useful now to kind of go into what is sexual harassment under the law. We all have a good feeling in our gut about what is okay and what isn't, but what does the law say? So under the Sex Discrimination Act, sexual harassment is when it's an unwelcome sexual advance or unwelcome request for sexual favours to the person harassed. It's unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature, in circumstances in which a reasonable person, having regard to all the circumstances that it's occurring in, would have anticipated that the person possibly would have been offended, humiliated, or intimidated by that conduct. So that's quite a legal mouthful, but what it's really saying is that it's unwelcome conduct, it's sexual in nature, and it's something that disturbs, offends, intimidates another person. It's often repeated, but it may just be a one-off act as well, and it certainly is a type of gendered violence, and it most definitely makes work difficult and impossible for the worker who's experiencing the harassment. So there's a really wide breadth of conduct that can be sexual harassment, and it can include things from off the cuff suggestive comments or jokes, through to staring or leering, or unwelcome touching, unwanted invitations to go out on dates or requests for sex. We've also had a few cases here recently of continued professions of love towards a younger co-worker, really pursuing them romantically at work. That too is sexual harassment. It can be intrusive questions about a person's private life or body or dating history. Unnecessary familiarity, like brushing up against someone. It can be, things in the environment as well, like having porn displayed in the staff locker room, or images of a sexual nature communicated through text and face. So there is really a broad range of things that are sexual harassment, and of course it can go all the way to criminal conduct as well, such as rape and assault. So as we go through the webinar today, really fundamentally what we're going to be talking about is your obligations as an employer to provide a safe workplace for your workers, and to provide an equal and respectful workplace for your workers as well. So we're going to be talking about what the Fair Work Act and federal and state discrimination laws expect you as an employer to do for your employees. There actually, you may have heard in Parliament at the moment, there's some new bills being introduced proposing to change the Fair Work Act and the human the rights legislation as well. So really what it means is that the obligation, the burden on employers is going to increase. It should the bills pass, of course. There's going to be a positive duty on employers to take reasonable and proportionate measures to eliminate sex discrimination and harassment as far as possible. So there really is, it's not good enough anymore just to react when a worker makes a complaint to you. You're really going to have to take a much more proactive approach in preventing and doing the homework and putting the measures in place to try and stop it from occurring in the first place. There's also going to be a new offence of subjecting a person to a hostile workplace environment on the grounds of sex. So that's really recognising that, say for instance, some male-dominated workplaces are incredibly difficult and hostile for a female or non-binary worker to be in. And it may not be any one person saying any one thing on a particular day. It's really that recognising that the culture itself can be so constantly hostile to a worker, that in itself will be an offence, and the employer has to proactively try and prevent that from occurring. Further, the Fair Work Act amendments. So it will specifically prohibit sexual harassment of workers and persons seeking to become workers, so prospective employees, as well as people conducting businesses or undertakings in a workplace. So that would cover like an independent contractor going into a workplace and doing work as well, and provides for the granting of remedies if that happens. So there will be that it's giving the Fair Work Commission the power to deal with those matters. Basically, it will be a little bit similar to the current general protections jurisdiction, but it will be specifically around an employer will be able to make a claim to deal with sexual harassment. So it's increasing the workers' options for making claims against the business. So going backwards again. As I said, there's going to be this positive duty on employers. So as I said, really going to have to take a proactive approach to preventing the harassment and discrimination in the workplace. So, we'll go into a bit later about the steps you can take to start to develop a policy or chat with your employees and make it a safe workplace. But it'd be really a good idea to start thinking and have all these things in place before this duty becomes a law. It happens already, but a principal will also be vicariously liable for any sexual harassment perpetrated by the principal's employer agents. That's a fancy legal way of saying that if one of your employees sexually harasses another employee and you have failed to do anything about it to prevent it or deal with it, you can be vicariously liable, as an employer. So again, and the defense to that is that you can, if you prove that you've taken all reasonable steps to prevent that harassment, then you won't be vicariously liable. So again, there's going to be a bigger positive duty on employers to deal with these issues. Further, it's again getting a bit legal, but the courts will have discretion to award costs where they see it just to do so. So in the case where one party has completely failed to make a case, it may well be that if your employee brings a court action against you, you may have costs awarded against you at the end of the day as well. So as I said, we're really going to need to move away from a reactive model towards a far more preventative approach, dealing with all forms of discrimination and victimization in the workplace. So, I mean, obviously, I'd like, it's not all doom and gloom, you're going to get in trouble. It's a good thing if you can put these measures in place. Hopefully, at the end of the day, you'll have a happier and healthier workforce, which will also be more productive for you. So we're going to chat now about some normalised behaviours in the industry. So, Jamie, I know that you've had a lot of experience. I hear a lot about people's disclosures of what's happened, but what are some of those kind of lower level things that might be normal but unacceptable?
Yeah, I guess some quite normalised and inappropriate behaviours that you see quite frequently and often in hospitality workplaces. It's things like walking across the bar and grabbing someone's waist if they go past, or making comments as someone bends over, at knockoffs, continuously asking someone to go home with them once they've said no, hooking up with someone, or a staff member hooking up with another staff member, and then a staff member sharing those intimate details to other workers. If you're an employer, it's only hiring like young, attractive women. and being quite biased in who you're hiring. And also if you're an employer or a person in a position of power, looking up with staff members, which is super common in hospitality because a lot of the time either managers are young or you're hiring all of these attractive people. And so there's that fine line where it's quite blurred in terms of like professional workplace conduct and working with your friends or people you're attracted to. But it's really important to know that if you're a manager or a position of power, it's not appropriate to sleep with your staff because there is that power dynamic, and that really blurs the line and can put people in really uncomfortable positions where they're marginalised, and their shifts might get cut because the manager all of a sudden decides that he doesn't want to, sleep with that person or that person said something and it gets awkward. So yeah, it's really important to kind of know those really normalized, inappropriate behaviors and start to kind of eradicate them from the business. We've seen a lot of typical responses from employers, say that they just haven't had adequate training on how to deal with this themselves. So they're automatically out of their depth and they don't really know how to move forward. So then both people stop and there's a roadblock. Another thing to really think about is that if the person being accused, the perpetrator, is a venue owner or a person in a position of power, and the manager is the one trying to take the report, they're also put in a vulnerable position because that's their boss, and if they act on that, their jobs will also get put on the line and their reputation. And it's a cycle of corruption that you just keep seeing. It's quite difficult to break. Typical outcomes, again, things are commonly brushed under the rug. The survivor, the person trying to report, is bullied, silenced, and fired, and the report isn't followed up and nothing is done. I also wanted to highlight that a lot of people in the industry are scared of this movement because they think it's going to vilify Adelaide hospitality in a time when COVID has well and truly made the industry suffer. Like, we've been one of the biggest industries to suffer the most. But this is a part of positive change because it's essentially being like, well, we need our staff to be respected and safe at work. Like, it's the bare minimum that your staff members aren't getting sexually assaulted or harassed at work. And it's just really starting to promote and cultivate a better culture where that will eventually get the industry stronger. And you'll be more desirable as a business as well, which we'll kind of go into a little bit more down the track.
Yeah, so thank you. So true. So that's right. So I guess really the message is there's behaviours out there that are normalised, and it's time to start thinking about those and dealing with them and preventing them because certainly the risk is going to be increasing to you as an employer. So now I'll just go into a bit about if and this is with the current laws, I might add. If your employee does suffer sexual harassment at work, what are their legal options? What kind of legal claims might they be filing against you as their employer? So we'll go into each of those in a bit more depth, but there's a stop sexual harassment order in the Fair Work Commission or a general protections claim, or there's also complaints of unlawful sexual discrimination, including sexual harassment in either the Human Rights Commission or the State Equal Opportunity Commission. They could also file a workers' compensation claim if what's happened to them has caused them to suffer a psychological injury, or they could even make a Safe Work SA complaint if it's a reportable incident. So I'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail. Apologies. So workers' compensation, hopefully you're aware of that as an employer. You should have some registration in place, but often we think of workers' compensation in terms of when someone injures themselves physically at work by falling over or cutting themselves or something like that. But it can also be for a psychological injury, and if something happens to them at work and then they suffer, an emotional, psychological injury from that. So it can include depression or post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, etc. For a worker to be eligible for workers' compensation, that kind of injury, work does need to have been the significant contributing cause of the psychological injury. So again, I guess it's another area where it will be important for you to have shown that you have tried to deal with the harassment that occurred and deal with the employee in a really fair and transparent way, in a way that hasn't contributed to their psychological injury if something has happened to them at work. The Stop Sexual Harassment Order in the Fair Work Commission. So that's relevant if your employee is still in the workplace, they haven't left or quit or moved on. So really, it's about they could ask the Fair Work Commission to mediate. So filing a claim, the Fair Work Commission organises an independent like mediation between yourself and your employee, and perhaps a third party that might have been the harasser. It's not a thing that is meant to result in compensation or reinstatement of the worker to that position, but it's about preventing future sexual harassment being made. So the Fair Work Commission can order you as an employer to take certain actions to stop the harassment continuing. So it may be not having those two workers on the same shift, or it could be a range of things, but really that's what it's there for. So look, I think it's a bit of an underused resource, really, because I think it could actually be a really good way, especially for a small business that doesn't have a big HR team or can't afford like a third party investigator or mediator. It could be a really good way to have that independent person from the Fair Work Commission kind of come in and help you sort out the issues within your workplace that has led to your worker being harassed or feeling unsafe and unhappy in the workplace. So free mediation to help you resolve that matter in your workplace. Like, I think, yeah, obviously it would be a bit confronting if you received notification that one of these claims has been filed, but I think really it could be quite a useful process for both worker and employer to go through. Moving on, your employee could also file a general protections claim in the Fair Work Commission on the basis of being discriminated against on the basis of sex, so being treated differently because they're a woman or a non-binary person, or if they've suffered adverse action for making a complaint. So sexual harassment has been found to constitute sex discrimination in this jurisdiction, and it can also be adverse action. So the penalties there, as you can see, are quite large. If it were to go to court, so sorry to backtrack a little bit, the first step of the process is a mediation, like with the Stop Harassment Order. If that fails, the employee can take the matter to court after that. If it goes that far and the judge finds against you, the maximum penalty is $66,000 per contravention for a corporation, or $13,320 for an individual. So certainly a large quantum there. A huge risk, really. The courts can also make other orders such as reinstatement or other compensation as well. So I wanted to go into a bit about what adverse action is. What it's really saying is that an employee has the right to make a complaint about their employment to you. They have the right to come to you and say, look, I'm not sure that I'm getting paid properly, or, I'm sorry, but I hurt myself at work and, I need your help to deal with this safety situation. And they certainly can come to you with a complaint about sexual harassment. And it's illegal for you to take adverse action against them. So that would include dismissing them, or what they call injuring an employee in their employment. That means basically maybe changing their shifts in a way that is negative, or looking them over for training or promotion. Basically anything that is treating them or lessening their position in the workplace, cutting their shifts, refusing to hire them, all those kind of things. So that's what an adverse action is. So if an employee comes to you with a complaint, you as an employer should be very careful to not do anything that could be construed as having an adverse action. And of course, I'd encourage you to take their complaints seriously and deal with it appropriately, which we'll go into in a little bit. So the other two claims that that your employee may have are complaints, making a complaint in either the Human Rights Commission or the Equal Opportunity Commission. So there's longer timeframes for the employee to make those complaints. So even if something happened up to 2 years ago, an employee can still file those claims against you. So I guess it's recognizing that often it takes quite a long time for them to process and get the help they need to be in a place to start to deal with the legal side of things. So next, really, I guess those are the legal claims that you could have. And what I kind of wanted to talk about from here is really the idea that if you do the groundwork and you try to fundamentally create like a happy and healthy workplace, hopefully you're going to not encounter any of these problems. Hopefully you'll have happy and safe staff that won't be making complaints and won't be, you know, if let's hope nothing bad does happen, but if something bad does happen to them at work, that they'll feel supported and taken care of. And in that way, you're lessening your risk as an employer. So really, it all starts with fundamental workplace equity and respect. You know, what does that really mean? Obviously, it means treating everybody equally and with respect, but you know, home and work life are becoming more blurred, and I think it's especially in a larger workplace when you're, say, managing a large team, or like Jamie was saying, everyone's so busy, and you know, it's such a busy industry, and the industry's been through a lot with COVID and everything. It's kind of easy to overlook in the day-to-day that every employee has like a complex personal life history and set of experiences, and it can lead to challenges in managing a group of people with all those different beliefs and experiences, as well as that community standards and current conversations about what isn't acceptable are changing, and sometimes staff, along with businesses, just need some extra help to understand what is and isn't appropriate in terms of speaking or dealing with their co-workers. So just, yeah, we've got actually a whole fee-for-service training package on workplace equity and respect, and especially bystander action, and also, you know, how to do this work within your business. So I really am skimming over the real highlights here, but if you're interested, do talk to us separately. But I just wanted to touch on, you know, how do you go about creating a safe workplace? Obviously, fundamental beliefs are important. You know, what kind of beliefs about equality and respect for women are you demonstrating through your actions day to day with customers and staff? And I think a good way to think about it is, you know, think about your youngest or your newest employee. You know, really from day one, do they know who to speak to or how to report something if they are harassed at work? Do they feel empowered to speak up? Do they know in your particular workplace, like what is and what isn't acceptable? Say, for instance, of a drunk patron or something like that. Do they know where to draw the line? And do they feel supported to draw that line? You know, ask yourself those questions and think about whether they have that knowledge, and if not, you know, how can you make sure that they're aware of where to go and who to seek for help? You know, are the policies readily available behind the bar in your workplace? Do you lead by example? Like, do you, if someone comes to you with a question or complaint, do you take the time to sit with them and listen to them properly, or do you kind of send the message that you're too busy or it's not important enough? You know, you really need to think about that most junior little person in your workplace. Do they feel supported to come to you for help? So really, you know, and also obviously if you're seeing violence or harassment in your workplace, it is your business. And I think sometimes again with everyone leading such complex lives. And I guess this is as well, leading into the situation perhaps an employee might be suffering from or experiencing rather domestic or family violence. Like if you become aware that something's happening to your worker in the workplace, it does become your business to try and support them as best you can. I just wanted to go into a bit more about the idea of bystander action. So this is really encouraging and empowering your employees to stand up and say something and speak up if they see something in their workplace that isn't okay. So bystander action, by encouraging a worker to stand up and talk up against that if they see it, it's discouraging both the person perpetrating the harassment and supporting the victim or the person experiencing the harassment at the same time. So it helps to improve the culture, and it helps to stamp out that, those kind of normalized behaviours that we've been talking about are acceptable. So, and I guess it's kind of recognising as well, like if a worker's standing there and letting some of that behaviour go, really they're supporting the bullying behaviour, and that person experiencing the harassment is going to assume that everyone else thinks it's okay and not feel supported. So again, we do have a whole training package on this, how to go about this, but really by speaking up as a bystander, you're respectfully challenging the behaviour, you're offering support to the person who's the target of the harassment, and the bystander can either challenge that behaviour on the spot directly, or if they don't feel safe to do so, they can come and report it to you as their employer. So yeah, really it's about empowering, having those conversations with your staff and empowering them to feel safe to report it, whether they're seeing it or whether they're experiencing it. So I might so Jamie, I know that when we're talking about implementing a policy of sexual harassment, there's things that workplaces can do to kind of identify where the risks are and how they might occur. So what do you think? How would that look in a small hospitality business?
But yeah, there's a few things you can start to do as an employer to take agency and control and like cultivating a really safe environment. Even organizations like the Working Women's Centre, when they offer these trainings, a lot of the time they do kind of like anonymous safety surveys where they kind of assess the safety from staff members. And if it's an anonymous survey and all of your staff members do fill out this survey on like how safe they feel at work, you kind of get to gauge pretty good understanding of how safe your employees feel at work. So that's something I definitely recommend doing. But on top of that, it's just opening up dialogue with your staff. Like take initiative and like call a staff meeting and be like, hey, today I really want to talk about sexual harassment in the workplace, and all of these conversations are happening, and I want to make sure that you all feel supported and safe and respected. And I want to know, do you know how to report? Do you know how to follow up on a report? Do you know your rights as a worker? And do you feel safe in this venue? Take the initiative to ask them what they need within that environment, because the staff will tell you if they feel safe enough to do so. So that's probably one of the biggest ones that you can just really just set the example that having these conversations in your workplace is accepted and can be taken seriously.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. I really like your point around how it's so hard sometimes to start talking about these things, but the more you do it and the more comfortable you are with it, the more practice you get at it, then the easier it is going to be for your staff to come to you and speak about these things at will. So it is hard sometimes to start these conversations, but it needs doing. So I've just stepped through there some steps you can go through to develop strategies to deal with sexual harassment. And again, if you need help with further training or looking at your policies, that's something we can offer help with. But really, first step, identify people who are at risk of sexual harassment. So, obviously, women are more often sexually harassed than men, but other factors may also contribute to that, such as, workers who are under 30 or workers in insecure working arrangements such as casual staff may feel more at risk because they're feeling less secure in their work and less able to speak up if it happens. Secondly, accept that sexual harassment does occur. I think no one likes to think about their workplace as being one that has issues or problems, but no matter how equal and respectful your workplace is, you're a business and you're dealing with external parties. It is probably going to occur at some point in your business. So accept that it occurs, and know that, like I said earlier, only 17% of conduct is actually reported. So it may be that it is occurring and you're just not hearing about it because your staff are not feeling safe enough, or it's just accepted behaviour that they don't feel it's worth complaining about. Thirdly, identifying the hazards and risks. So treat it just as you would any other workplace risk, like you monitor your workplace for physical hazards in a H&S way. It's exactly the same for sexual harassment. So yeah, again, walk through your physical environment and have a look for things like dark corners late at night that don't have cameras on them, that kind of thing. The culture of the workplace, and yeah, Jamie's point about even having an anonymous survey to find out from your workers when they think the risks are. And then once you've identified those risks, you can start implementing safer ways to help manage those and control those risks. So it may be, making sure your environment is safe, and say making sure workers aren't working alone at night, having a buddy system. There's many things you can do to help to control those risks. And then, again, developing those policies and implementing them. So those policies should really be setting out what behaviour won't be tolerated, and setting out unacceptable behaviour, how to report sexual harassment, making it very clear to everyone how you will deal with a report if someone needs to make one, and setting out support services that are available as well. Lastly, provide training about these new policies you have, and have those discussions at the staff meetings, etc. Make sure that every new employee knows that there is a policy and that they can follow it. I think here at the Work Community Centre, we often get calls from workers who, yes, their workplace has a policy in a drawer somewhere. Everyone kind of knows it's there, but no one really looks at it or follows it properly. I think that's a really big risk. It's easy to feel comfortable if you're like, yeah, we've got a policy, yeah, everyone knows, but it may not be the case. You really need to keep going back to it and reminding people it's there and that you will take these kind of things seriously. So the last thing is to the reporting and the responding to sexual harassment claims. So make sure that your workers know how to report it, and that you will be there supporting them. So I just wanted to go into a bit more about how to deal with a complaint from the staff. So really, obviously, if a staff member approaches you, you need to make sure that they're safe and that they have the support that they need to deal with their harassment, and that you may have an employee assistance program, or even giving them a 1-800 respect number, or, in that moment, let them know that there's help out there and that you'll support them if they need it. But once you've looked after their immediate well-being, really you should be taking this complaint seriously, and doing an investigation about it. It can be really hard for a small business. They don't often have resources to go hiring third-party, investigators and whatnot to do it. But sometimes it may be the best outcome, especially if your workplace is so small that you can't possibly have a fair and independent view of what happens. Another common thing that happens is that the worker who is harassed is the one that ends up getting stood down or has their shifts cut while the investigation's taking place. It's not appropriate. You should really actually be standing down the employee who has been accused of the harassment with pay while the investigation is underway. And that investigation, it needs to be fair and transparent, really. Everyone, both involved parties, need to know what the process is, keep them up to date about, when they can expect an outcome. And once, you've taken everyone's responses genuinely into account, you can decide on a reasonable and appropriate outcome. So again, yeah, we could go into a lot more detail about this, but the idea is if you're doing what you can to deal with everything in the fairest and safest way for employees, you're going to be protecting yourself and your business should your employee make a legal claim against you. Like we talked about earlier, there's going to be more of a positive obligation on you as an employer to prevent and address harassment. So going through these steps carefully will not only hopefully lead to better outcomes for your employees, but also, lessen your risk as an employer. So again, just kind of summarising the risks. If you don't have that healthy workplace, and if you haven't taken these steps to do the policies and give your staff training and make sure everyone is comfortable and aware of how to report harassment, as we've gone through, your employer may have legal claims for sexual harassment. But if you also don't have a fair investigation process, the person who is accused of the harassment may also have claims against you for like unfair dismissal or general protection. So again, a bit outside of our scope today to go into, but there's plenty of information available on the Fair Work Ombudsman site for small businesses, such as the Small Business Dismissal Code, that really steps through for you as a small business how to have fair complaint and investigation processes and how to manage that process in a way that's fair to everyone. And finally, the other risk is reputational. As I understand, Jamie, hospital workers talk, and word will get out if you don't have a safe and respectful workplace.
Yeah, definitely. The Adelaide hospitality scene is so small. It's so interconnected, and people do talk. And there are venues where you know if that's a safe place to work or not. And because that gets out, it's just within your best interest as a venue to start conducting these trainings on sexual harassment so you become desirable to staff, because again, COVID is absolutely influenced all of us in a really negative way in terms of the hospitality industry. We've been one of the biggest sectors to get knocked down. We're understaffed, overworked, underfunded, and we're all exhausted. We're all super burnt out. And if everyone's losing staff, then that means that as a worker, you kind of got to pick at the litter. Like you can go to any venue and get work like that because everyone needs workers at the moment. So the power's kind of been put back on staff for the first time in a while. But if you've got two venues and they offer the exact same thing, but one of them has done a safety training and a training on sexual harassment or assault, and one hasn't, you're going to go with the one that has. And that's just a no-brainer, really. So if you get some kind of accreditation, or you kind of stand for promoting that you want to treat your staff well, you'll get more staff members and you'll become a desirable person to work for. At the same time, patrons also talk, and there's a lot of conversations going on from not just workers, but patrons coming into your venues on which venues are sexually harassing their staff and which ones aren't. And there's lots of conversations going on that I've heard of people boycotting venues because they know that there's misconduct happening with their staff. So it's coming both sides. So again, it benefits everyone by conducting these trainings. Like there's no loser in this situation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you, Jamie. It's so true. And yeah, even as a patron, I've witnessed sexual harassment in a venue, and I'm like, unless that's being dealt with, and you can visibly see that the venue is stamping it out, like I'm not going to go back there. So it really is in the interest of business and the workers and everyone just to, it's honestly a very probably cost-effective way to attract staff by having these policies in place. Thank you. So look, in the time that we have left, I just wanted to touch on some more positive things that you can do. Get involved in these campaigns against sexual harassment. Talk to your networks and your suppliers about what they're doing within their businesses to combat sexual harassment. So the more conversations we have, again, the stronger and better and more educated we're all going to get about this issue. Further, the Equal Opportunity Commissioner, Jodine Kearney, is calling for a review into workplace culture in the hospitality industry. So support that call and get involved. There's also the Equal Opportunities We're Equal campaign, which you can go to their website and check that out. So really, it's about signing up and going through their education statement, whatnot, to have zero tolerance for discrimination and respectful behaviours in your workplace. So it's a very visible way of showing both your staff and your patrons that, you know, you're serious about being equal at work. And yeah, just to wrap up, as I mentioned, we do have further workplace training and education programs available for businesses. So we can give you some more in-depth training on the things I've mentioned today about workplace equity and respect, sexual harassment and workplace bullying, and also I touched on the issue of domestic violence in the workplace as well, and how to handle a disclosure if your staff member is experiencing domestic or family violence. And actually, on that note, I am holding another webinar in a month or so on the new laws around domestic and family violence leave. So check out that one on our website. That will be coming up soon. And yeah, please feel free to contact us if you want more information about any of those things. And check out the other webinars I've got coming up as well. I forgot to put in a slide about those. Oh, and yes, as well, if you're developing a policy and you want our view or a legal view on how your policy stacks up, and if we have any suggestions, we can provide consultation on that as well. So look, it's really come to the end of the webinar. It's 5 o'clock. So thank you, Emily, for your comments. Thank you so much to Jamie for joining me here this afternoon. I'm very glad we've been having these conversations, and I really hope this is a really great resource that we'll have available on our website for people to catch up with later. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great working with you, and we're very keen to hear more about the work you're doing, and hope we can keep doing some work together. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Check out our websites and keep following us on social media, and we hope that we can interact again soon. Thank you. Thanks, Emily. Bye.
Bye, Emily.